and welcome to, as I mentioned just now, our third meeting of the Patients and Communities Committee. Lots of interesting stuff has been taking place since the last meeting, so we'll hear about some of it in a minute. But just to start the meeting with some sort of housekeeping, the meeting is being recorded for the purpose of taking the notes, the minutes from the meeting, but also to be posted on our website, so people who could not attend the meeting could still hear what has been discussed. As you all know, the meeting is held in public, and I would encourage that people take part in the meeting and ask questions if they feel that they want to ask any questions to what is being presented. We're not going to introduce every committee member because we'll spend lots of time on doing that, but I'll just say who I am. My name is Alona Deret, and I'm the chair of this committee, as well as an independent non-exec director of the ICB board. So welcome everybody, full on agenda, and I'll just get on with it. Now, just to say that the papers for the meeting have been circulated, and as a general rule, for the committee members, we take them as read. So people who present, please do not present every slide, but just give us the key points and highlight the key issues you would like us to discuss during the meeting, please. Now, we had a few apologies. I think Rachel has noted them already, but I'll just mention Cassie Arma, who is another non-exec director, Paul Hemingway, who is Associate Director for Communications and Engagement, and Alex Stewart from Healthwatch Norfolk. But I am given to understand, and I can see Judith, who is present. Thank you so much, Judith. If there is anybody else who apologies, but I'm sure Rachel will list all on the minutes from this meeting. Declaration of interests. Again, there is a register within the pack which has been circulated with all interests declared and recorded. However, if during the discussions there is a new conflict of interest which may come up for you or related to a particular topic only, please can you declare it at the point of that discussion so we can update the register. I will move on to the item number 3 on the agenda, the minutes from previous meeting and matters arising. So I don't know if, Rachel, can we share them or we'll just take them, that people read them? Okay, yeah, okay, thank you so much, Rachel, thank you. So firstly, I would like to take any feedback on the accuracy of these minutes, please. Anyone has got any feedback in terms of the accuracy? Please, if you can use the electronic hand raising so I can see you, because when we share, people disappear from my screen, so I don't see everyone. Okay, in terms of accuracy, now I do not have any hands raised, so we'll take this as the minutes are accurate. And committee members, are you happy to approve them? Yeah, I can see nods. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Rachel, for pulling them all together. It's never easy. There's lots of materials there, so thank you so much from all of us. Matters arising, before we move on, are there any matters arising anyone would like to identify which are not appearing on the agenda today, please? Do we have any matters arising from anybody? No, I cannot see any hands up. So thank you so much. We'll move on. Thank you, Rachel. Action log, item number 4. So those are the actions which have been captured from the previous meetings. And green usually are those actions which have been complete, and yellow are still in progress. But nonetheless, I am going to invite people to very quickly update us where they are at with those actions. So I'll start with Rebecca. Rebecca, whilst we recognize that co-production is an ongoing process, would you like to tell us anything and update to what is already listed on the action log, please?
I do cover a bit of this in my update later on in the agenda, and it might be quite good to come back with a kind of an agenda item to have a really good update about some of the stuff that's been going on, maybe later in the year.
Yep. That will be good, and also probably will be good for people who we will talk about co-production, and we just need to make sure that we all talk about the same thing. So it'll be good in that session you are mentioning if we can just summarize what co-production is and what co-production isn't, so then we can always refer to that as a reminder. Please, Rebecca. So that will be sort of a new action for later in a year meeting, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Community voices, we're going to have an update at July meeting, so we're going to leave that as it is now. I know there has been lots of work taking place, and I think we have a staff member now in place who will be leading the project. Is that right, Rebecca?
Almost. We're getting dangerously close.
Almost.
Yes, I think it's June the 12th. She's joining us, so we're getting
Excellent.
there.
Excellent. Thank you. So we'll have a proper update later. Lived experience representative. Paul's name is there, but Rebecca, may I come back to you, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So as everyone be aware, we need a payment method and a policy, and that's turned out to be quite a tricky piece of work. It's a very unique role. So we're just continuing to work through some of the HMRC issues. I had a really interesting meeting this morning with someone from one of the London trusts, and their rewards and recognition policy has been approved by HMRC. And she's helping me and a colleague from finance kind of go through a similar process to get our policy. They have something that they call rewards and recognition. So I think we'll align our policy with that, and then I'm really hoping that we can finally get going on that. I've got to catch up with my colleague on Thursday, so we'll just see how far she's been able to get with some of the finance stuff around that. It will then have to go back to the I think remuneration, people and culture committee for sign off. There isn't one scheduled, so I've asked for when the earliest possible opportunity. So I'm just sort of really sorry that this has taken so much longer, but it's been a huge learning curve for me, certainly. And I think it's just really making sure that we can attract people who would otherwise feel it's a barrier, people that, maybe are on benefits, and, some of the people that I know we want to hear from. So I think it is, a good piece of work and will be worth doing in the end.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, our original plan was that we'll have people in place by July meeting. If this has to go to the people committee, which I think is in July, I can see sort of delays happening. So it'll be good to try and progress as much as possible. Oh,
I was told there wasn't a committee scheduled, so I was hoping one could be called.
Okay.
But I'll look into that. Sorry.
Okay, please do. Thank you. Okay, moving on, John is going to present a report anyway on complaints, so we're going to skip that, wait until the agenda item. ICS organogram, again, as an action for Paul. Mark, may I call up on you, please, for this one?
Yes, absolutely, Aliona. And there is work ongoing in this. So we are, as an ICB, of course, going through the restructure piece, but also looking at the governance more widely. So this is work in progress, and as soon as that's completed, we will bring this back here to the group, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yes, of course. Thank you. And then we have another one for you, Rebecca. National Patient Survey.
Oh.
Is in progress, and we're going to have an update in July. Anything else in addition to that?
No, I don't think so. No, sorry.
Okay, that's all good. And the last one, the committee objectives and forward plan. We have had the meeting, and we have the draft notes from it and a draft plan. So the members of this committee will receive all that shortly when the draft is finalized and ready for circulation. So this concludes our action log. Thank you very much indeed. So we're going to move on to item number 5 now, joint forward plan. Now, this is an interesting and very exciting development, and is really a good timing for all of this to help us put the plans together, so we know where we're heading and how we're going to know that we're getting there. Having read the draft, I was encouraged to see that we had a good engagement of over 700 people, I think, who took part, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. So to help us understand a little bit more about the plan, the purpose of it, and how we're going to utilize it going forwards, I have the pleasure of inviting Andrew Palmer, who is the Executive Director of the Strategy, Performance and Transformation, and in spare time also Deputy Chief Executive, to present the work to date. And Rebecca, I will invite you to support this conversation, please, because I know you've been involved in some of the work. So, Andrew, I haven't seen you yet, but I'm sure you're here. So I will pass it over to you. She says.
I don't think Andrew is here yet, Aliona. I can't see him in the...
No, I'm looking now, Mark. Okay.
Rebecca, could you call him in?
Yeah.
Rachel.
Rachel, I think you might need to do it. I don't think I've got that. It looks different.
Whilst this is being sorted, may I just swap the agenda items around so we don't spend the time waiting? So if it's okay, I'll move on to the next one and then we'll come back to this agenda. So the next agenda item is Health Watch updates. And yeah, I'm just looking if any change. Okay, so Andy and Judith, you are both here. I know we do not have formal reports for the meeting. However, I would be very grateful if you can give us a snapshot of any work, recent work, which has taken place. And I know that, Andy, you have some interesting reporting regarding dementia services. So I'm looking forward to hear about that. So who wants to start first, Judith or Andy?
Go on,
Okay,
Judith.
I'll go first. I'll go first. I first of all will apologise because I've been on leave for 2 weeks. I've come back today, but I've got COVID, so I'm at home. And Alex is not well either. He's gone home with a chest infection. So I'm here at really short notice, but I do have a kind of very brief update for you. And I believe this was shared actually prior to the meeting, but I don't think it's actually in the papers for the meeting. We have recently been successful in agreeing some multi-year programmes of work with some key providers in the system, which is really good news for us, for our future sustainability. A big piece of work with Norfolk County Council Adult Social Care, which will be looking at the voice of the older person, but carers as well, discharge, dementia, and Andy, I'm sure you'll have something interesting to comment on that, but for Norfolk and about diagnosis and support. So there's a big piece of work. We will be beginning with adult social care, also ongoing programmes of work with the Mental Health Trust and also Norfolk Community Health and Care. And we're really pleased to get these pieces of work going forward. And also they're going to focus on engaging with patients, you know, and service users, carers, and sometimes staff on experiences and their thoughts. In March this year, we published a report about NHS health checks, which was undertaken for public health at Norfolk County Council to find out about people's experiences and knowledge of and uptake of the health checks. The report has been published and it can be found on our website. Some quite revealing things about people not being invited. So the reason a lot of people don't have the health checks is because actually they aren't invited to them. And I think that's an issue there in terms of primary care and motivation for doing so potentially. Also some misunderstandings about what a health check actually is. Sometimes people think it's a much wider thing than it actually is. And it's actually really a cardiovascular disease kind of assessment as opposed to a complete health check. So but yeah, that report has been published and is available if people are interested to go and look. And just to say, a big piece of work we've literally started today, and I should have been at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital myself today. We've called it 3 Hospitals, 3 Weeks, and we are, as a complete team, we've never done this before, but as a complete team, we are all going into the 3 hospitals for 3 separate weeks this summer. So this week is the Queen Elizabeth at King's Lynn. The James Paget dates on 19th to 23rd of June, and then July we go into the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. And we will be there, and we've got little questionnaires to talk to people about, and it will be patients, patients, inpatients, and people at outpatients clinics, people in emergency departments, and some staff and relatives and carers. And we're actually trying to cover virtually the whole day. We're going to be there into the evening, so we've split ourselves into shifts, and so we're hoping to capture people at different times of the day. So we've never done anything quite like this before. It will be interesting to see what is revealed, and we hope it's going to be really useful for everybody. But there will be individual reports on each site at the end of each of those, but then also there'll be an overriding report which will perhaps draw comparisons and highlight themes that are coming from all of them. So I suppose that's our biggest story at the moment in terms of what we're focusing on through this summer. So
thank you, Judith. Yeah, it's quite a portfolio there, isn't it? We'll look forward to hear of the findings and some recommendations you may have from those reports. So all very exciting going forward. Any questions for Judith from anybody? Yes, Tracy Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Judith, that's really interesting about the Health Watch reports, the NHS health checks, and why people potentially aren't accessing them. So certainly we're looking through the Wellness on Wheels programme, the WOW bus going out and about, and we're now actually having health checks within that bus. So perhaps for some of those communities that find it really difficult to access those in primary care, we can kind of encourage that take up and that offer with underserved communities, and certainly looking at what we can provide in the wellness hub as well at Castle Quarters. So really I'll look at that report, and it'll really inform kind of how we work and how we can promote those health checks for more people to access them. So that would be really interesting.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Mark.
Yes, thanks, Judith. And echoing that, Tracy beat me to it. Particularly interested in those who feel they haven't had the invite or they haven't had the invite, and what we need to do around that. So any information you can share ahead of time on that would be helpful, because we get lots of positive feedback actually when those health checks do happen. So we want to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity, and if that's not happening, we need to do something about it. So please do. I know you share, but please do share as soon as possible on that one in particular. Thank you.
Yes, the report is published, so I can recirculate it. But it has been circulated with stakeholders that are involved in that work. But I can speak from experience. As a woman of the age I am, I should have had 3 invites by now, and I've never had one. So you have to say that I'm not
Something's
unique.
not working.
Yeah, the invites are just not coming out. So, but you're right in the sense of the positive feedback when people actually have their health check is actually really good. So we just need to make it happen more.
Yeah. Suzanne?
I was talking about that Public Health are taking forward the results from this feedback from this report as part of their commissioning of the whole NHS health check programme, and they will be taking steps to see how they can improve the invitation process and improve the uptake of the checks as well, because it is really important. Thanks.
It's interesting. Thanks, Suzanne. You mentioned about invitation process. Speaking to patients, the texts are used. Well, some people don't get them. So yeah, we need to think about how we actually reach people. It's not all by text or email. Thank you. Paula.
Thank you, Chair. Really helpful update, Judith. Just to say I'm here on behalf of the Health and Wellbeing Partnerships and the District Councils, and really delighted that you've been commissioned by Adult Social Care to hear the voice of older persons. And in time, it'd be excellent if you could come along to the Health and Wellbeing Partnerships across Norfolk and Waveney, so the districts can contribute into that and hear, because they've got local housing authority responsibilities, and I'm sure that would be helpful in terms of setting strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've actually should have members of staff at each and every one of those partnership meetings. We've had help from Norfolk County Council to make sure we were plugged in, but you should have Dan Norgrove over in the east there, and there should be a member of staff at every one of those. So yeah, absolutely, very happy to do that. But we are there already.
Yeah, I wasn't challenging the fact that you're not there. You're definitely in all the partnerships. I know that's a big stretch for Health Watch, but you're very welcome there. It's just that specific piece of work about older person's voice, I think, would be really key and is missing. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. I don't have any other hands up. So Judith, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to hearing from all the projects you just described in the future. I'll go over to Andy before we ask Andrew to present on his item. I think Andrew has joined us. So Andy, first over to you, please. Andy Jacob.
Thank you, Aliane. I'm Andy. I'm Chief Executive for Healthwatch Suffolk. Judith, hope you and Alex get better soon. I won't talk for much. I've got Susan Bailey, one of our researchers, to talk about one particular item. But in advance of that, I just want to say that next time around, if you're interested, we can also talk similarly about another report that's about to be published, which is around health coaching. It's an evaluation of health coaching from across the county. And we've just commenced some work, Susan's again involved in this, around home care as well, which will take place over the next 12 months or so. But Susan's here to talk about a report that we published last week during the Dementia Awareness Week, and it is about dementia. So can I hand over to Susan? Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon. My name's Susan Bailey. I'm a research officer at Healthwatch Suffolk. So we were approached this time last year by the Suffolk Dementia Action Partnership to help them with gathering people's experiences of living with or caring for someone with dementia. And the aim for that work was to help inform the development of a Suffolk dementia strategy. So we undertook 20 interviews, we had 100 feedback forms completed, and we've also looked at the comments that were left on our feedback centre. And we took all that information and analysed it and themed the comments. And as Andy said last week, we published our report, which can be found on our website. If you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I hope this works. Just to share with you some of the resources that we have created to go along with this. Can you see that, Andy? I can only see your face. Yeah,
yes,
you
we can.
Fantastic. So as I say, we themed the comments and drew out 36 key learning points across 7 main areas of focus. And this slide, which can also be found on our website, summarises those themes. And although this work is taking place in Suffolk, I imagine a lot of those messages are similar across different areas. We've also created a poster outlining the top 5 messages we wanted to draw people's attention to. So the fact that people wanted someone to guide them to support, that people wanted them to be taken seriously when they asked for help, and that they were recognised for the knowledge and experience they have. The importance of continuity of services for those people with dementia to help them build trusted relationships. The fact that hospitals are a difficult environment for those people with dementia, and we need to improve access to services that prevent admission as well as support people back home after a hospital stay. And that people wanted services that worked together, that drew on each other's skills and knowledge, and that worked with them, that worked with them and not against them. I'm going to try playing our video. I'm not sure. Let me know if you can hear the sound. Can you hear the sound, Andy?
Nothing yet.
No?
Yeah. No.
Oh, no? Let me try sharing once more and I'll try and get the video up. It's only 1 minute long, so I tried this earlier to practice, and you know how these things. You put it back to the beginning.
That's better. Thank you.
It seems to me that if you get any other terminal condition, you are overwhelmed with information and what to do with various cancers and things like that. But dementia doesn't seem to be that for some reason. And that has to change. If it doesn't change, things will continue to spiral out of control, and people will need care before they've had support. Let's face it, care must be more expensive than support. So let's support people the best we do.
Thank you. So I think what Peter says there, very succinctly pulls out the message, one of the key messages we wanted to make from this piece of work, which is, You know, why don't we treat dementia like any other illness? Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you. Do we have any questions? I would like to read the full report. I think you have sent the link to it, didn't you, Andy? And some emails, so I'll make some time to read. But from the highlights, is not really a good read. Is a worrying situation, and I know we have begun some work on it. We have the collaborative around, and dementia is the service which has been picked up to look into the provision for dementia. But I am also understanding that is a big piece of work for us to do and to make it much better. So I'm sure the evidence will be very useful for us to take into account when we make plans going forwards. Any questions for Andy, Susan, and Susan, please? No, I haven't got any hands up as far as I can see. No. So thank you both. Thank you for making the time to join us, Susan, for today. Thank you. And we'll look forward to hearing about the projects Andy mentioned earlier at future meetings. Thank you. Andrew, I think you have joined us now.
I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
I already done the introduction, so I think I'll just say over to you. Bear in mind that we have taken us read the pack, okay? So you don't have to go through every single page. Please summarize it and the key messages, please, Andrew, so we can then facilitate a discussion around it.
Yeah, very happy to. Thank you. And thanks for the time this afternoon to come along this early in the process to talk about it. So the slides hopefully were helpful. The plan itself will come to. Just a couple of things I wanted to say by introduction. So first, a few thank yous to Rebecca for the work that she's led on the engagement, and Liz Joyce for the coordinating of this, which is a very complicated piece of work. But also we've had system leads from across the whole system, and also partners from every sector, I think, contribute so far in some way or another. So whilst this is a very complex document, I think hopefully you can begin to see in there reflections of some of the work that everyone's involved in. So this is our first JFP that we've had to do. It is quite complicated. So we split it into two parts. Part one is the main body of the plan. Part two deals with the legal requirements. So these are both important things that we have to do. But we thought we couldn't possibly inflict 180 pages on anybody and expect them to read it, let alone our public and our population service users. So we've attempted to do that. We tried to structure it around the population health case for change. So really begin the document by understanding more about what it is that the population of Norfolk and Waveney might need. And we probably still have a way to go there in terms of going beyond just health need, but a really great section that Suzanne and her team have led. And then really the ambitions and the objectives are there in an attempt to respond to that case of change. And I think today you'd be interested to see whether you think we've succeeded or not so far in that. So does it feel like the things that we're going to do, the priorities that we've got, are going to make a difference to what the population needs? I think we've still got some work to do around language in the document, still a bit of NHS and health and care jargon in there. But really the aim of engaging so early in the process on this is that we've got time to give people a chance to feedback and then do something with it. So very much this is not bringing a near final draft along to say, well, it's pretty much in production, it's ready to go, what do you think? There's a real opportunity here, I think, to take the feedback and do something with it. We did have the opportunity to have a conversation in person with Healthwatch Norfolk last week, Andy, so very happy to extend the same to yourselves in Suffolk if you would find that helpful. And we've got Suffolk Health and Wellbeing Board last week and Norfolk on the 21st of June. So we're beginning now to do our roadshow. But I think for me today, it's for me to listen carefully, answer any questions, and then do my best to reflect views of the committee into that draft. And as I said, this is not the first time we're going to do it, but it is the first draft that we've done. So, Chair, with that, happy to hand back and have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I will start whilst people are thinking about questions. I will start with one. We talk about 700 responses. Are you able to provide the flavor where those responses came from by whoever contributed, just so we can understand where the engagement came from? That is the first one. And the second one, I know we have the 8 priorities, and I know in the narrative we talk about prevention, early intervention. Can you reassure us that when we think about the 8 priorities, within those 8 priorities, we are talking and thinking about prevention, early intervention services within it, rather than having a separate category. So it's just a reassurance that we are not yet, again, heading for firefighting, and we are going to start preventing people getting to the stage when we have to look after them in a much more complex way.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So if possible, it might be helpful for Rebecca to answer the question about the 700, because it's a huge piece of work that Rebecca did. And I don't want to make a mess of attempting to explain it, because it's such a brilliant piece of work. The 8 priorities, I think you're right. So we wanted to signal the importance of prevention, but we didn't want it to look like a box tick. So at the moment it's in there, but it's still perhaps got a way to go as a theme, I would say, to cut right through the documents. I think that's a really good observation today. Also something that came up when we met with Healthwatch last week. So I think what we will do with that is just push back in the conversations with the leads and the various boards that have developed the objectives, particularly under each ambition, and just make sure that that's in everyone's mind, because it really can't just be a response plan. That's the way the NHS is always planned on an annual basis. And if this is going to be different, we do need to make sure we bring that out. So, yeah, I can give you assurance that it's in there, but I think the fact that you picked it up shows that we've got a bit more work to do to have that golden thread through the document. But perhaps, Rebecca, you can speak about the engagement, if that's okay.
Thank you, Andrew.
So it was an anonymous survey, but it's obvious from the responses, and we did promote it very heavily with the public, but also with our staff. So there are an awful lot of quite detailed responses from people who are clearly working in the system. Most people identify themselves as an individual, but we did get a sort of handful, about 20, I think it was, who replied as an organisation. Lots of people who obviously had very personal stories to tell. Most people who replied left some free text. So a lot of people that are obviously using services or caring for people that do, and an awful lot of feedback from staff. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay?
Thank you. Okay, Tracy.
Yeah, just thinking about the ambitions, which has clearly come through from the population needs, but also from what the surveys have shown from those 700 people. But just thinking about some of the objectives within those 8 ambitions, that is there a means of sort of sense checking those with the population as well, that they're the right objectives with them? I know that we'd extensively been looking at that in those, writing those ambitions and thinking about that, but just that kind of sense checking as well, that they're the right objectives. Is there a process in for that during this sort of consultation phase?
So I think on that, we're going to struggle to go out in any kind of constructive way and do that directly with the population, I think. So, but we do have the chance to take that back, Tracy, through the boards again, and part of looking at it through, I guess, the lens of this committee, talking to the health and wellbeing boards, the health watchers, it is designed really to get a different eye on it. Otherwise, very much what we've got here is a kind of long-term plan. So those that know that well in the NHS know that someone sets a list of stuff you've got to do. You write a list of how you're going to do it, and then you put it on a shelf and you redo it a year later when you blow the dust off it. That really isn't the intention here. So I'm hoping the objectives are a bit closer to what people would expect to see. But I think, again, we're not done with this process. I think, if you haven't got thoughts today, do drop me a line afterwards. We're going to be working our way around all the stakeholders and visited a number of boards and management boards and so forth in the providers. But in the end, really, the conversation we were having last week on this is how do we test it on whether people feel it's right for what they want as a user of our services? Do these feel like things people care about? That for me is the ultimate test, isn't it? We can prescribe it, we can tell you what you should be thinking, but that's not how you do it, is it? You ask people. So that might be something that we could do more on when we get into the cycle of doing these regularly. I think we'll build on the work that Rebecca and the team have done, but it'll be quite challenging, I think, for this first draft. So I would look to us as professionals to advise them where they feel from your networks if they don't look right. I think that probably is a compromise, but that might be what we have to do on this occasion.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and I can see Shelley's very helpfully put in the chat about our community voices, because we've got a huge amount of insights kind of coming in all the time as well. So it is a good point to cross reference there, isn't it, as well?
That's right. Thank you, Tracy. I was going to point to that. Very helpful, and there's lots of conversations to draw from, Andrew. So that could be very helpful for thinking going forwards. Frankie.
Thank you, Aliona. I think this is really great, but it's an enormous piece of work. And I think what we are really keen that we get across and share is the 8 ambitions. You know, the 8 priority areas. Are these the right things? Are people happening? In terms of all the individual ambitions underneath those 8 priorities, you know, 21 is a lot, and yet there's millions missing because we can't cover everything there. So, for example, if we look at urgent and emergency care, we've said, well, let's focus on making ambulances get there quicker. Of course, we want to do that. Let's improve virtual ward and let's discharge people earlier. But it almost looks as if that's all we're doing. There's loads of other things that are wildly important in that arena. And just because they're not in the JFP doesn't mean they're not important and that we're not doing them. It's just that these are the 3 most sort of high profile things that we're going to measure and you can hold us to account for. And we are, nailing our colours to the mast, saying these are the 3 which we're going to, measure, improve, and really, really make a difference for them. But of course, we're also going to try and simplify access. Of course, we're going to try and avoid admission. Of course, we're going to try and improve the experience. All those other things, I think we almost have to take as read. So as Andrew says, I sort of, there's a little pinch of salt needed, I think, with this to say, are the headlines right? This will get better and better every year.
So that, if I may, Chair, that's a really good point. And just a couple of quick observations on that. When we did the most recent version of the long-term plan in response to the NHS plan, this was before COVID, if people can remember a time before COVID, this thing was 350 pages long and it had 418 individual objectives in it for a 5-year plan. And I painstakingly looked at each one and measured it. And I think 96% of them were all delivered in year 1. And that sort of set how we used to think, wasn't it? We had to do everything all at once and it had to happen immediately. And actually, if you look in here at things like the aging well and the prevention side, these are going to be long-term commitments that are going to start to shift our resources, our focus, our money, as opposed to box ticking to have a homework marked by the regulator, which is kind of, I don't think they're listening. They're probably not on this call, but they would probably agree that actually that's where we've been in the past. So the other thing about the materials is, for those that can remember the digital roadmap that we did about 5 or 6 months ago, that was again quite a complicated document, but we did produce some additional discrete materials with that pulled out the key messages and found a very different way of communicating those. So we had animations and some really nice content that was much more accessible. So again, help from the communications team with that. So I think we do plan to do that with this, and once the document is formally launched, then we're going to work alongside the 75th birthday celebrations really to kind of focus on it. And Frankie, your point on messaging, I think we can write something very different and think about all the different channels we can use to get the messages across alongside the plan, so that it's not a case of you read the plan or you don't. There'll be other ways that we can make those key messages acceptable to people and accessible. I think otherwise, you're going to get to sort of page 3 and close it down because it's too big. So we're trying to be all things to all people with this, but I think it's still too NHS-y for the general public, but we'll produce something alongside that, I think, that's different.
So a better accessible version at some point, yes, Andrew.
Yes.
But just picking up on Frankie's point, we will also have different mechanisms of sharing what else is happening. So whilst we'll have those priorities and ambitions, there's nothing to stop us, for example, to bring to this committee updates on a work which may not look obvious in a plan, but is happening and is making a difference. So we can talk about those things by other means too, to make sure the public is aware of what we're doing and has the opportunity to contribute, to say, don't bother focusing on that because actually we don't need it. Can you refocus this way? So we just need to think outside the box and find different ways of engaging and checking, doing our own health checks on the direction we're taking, and if that direction is actually going to get us in the right place or not. So I think it's very important for us not to forget about doing that, which I'm sure we'll not, because we have all sorts of interesting projects around it, and I'm sure Rebecca will tell us a little bit more when we come to people and communities approach. It's going to be part of that approach for the engagement. So okay, thank you so much. Any other questions for Andrew from anybody else? It is a big piece of work, and it's work in progress, isn't it? And eventually, when we have written it, and now that we are on the journey of delivering, it's going to be very interesting to see how that is going. But at the moment, it's all sort of paper-based a bit, isn't it? So it's we're looking for the reality. Okay, Paula.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, I just wanted to commend you and the team behind this joint forward plan, this strategy. You're right, it's a massive piece of work, but from a non-NHS perspective, I actually think it's an easy read. I think it's well laid out, especially the way that the tables take you through each of the objectives, and I'm looking forward to seeing it populated further, so thank you. I have two specific suggestions, and they are related to objective 4A. That it'd be really helpful to have a bit more who within that section, because you focused on in terms of bringing health services closer to people's communities, rightly on the NHS assets, but I think if you could, my challenge would be to think wider than that, and through the health and wellbeing partnerships and district councils and the DWP. And the other one is even more specific, which is objective 4B on dentistry. Obviously, that is a new area of expertise that the ICBs have been asked to take on. And whilst I think the strategy in terms of commissioning and looking at services is very good, everything I see through community voices and elsewhere says dentistry is a real problem, and I would suggest we need to be a bit more ambitious around that objective. It's not just addressing existing dentistry services, but thinking about how we bring additionality into the system. So that was just one thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. That is a challenge for Mark. I'm sure he can tell us more about it.
No, absolutely, Paula, and thank you for those comments. So on the dentistry, absolutely. I can't say that the team were particularly thrilled about the prospect of having to pick up dentistry, because of course that was one of the things that came across to the ICB, and we're not even quite a month. Well, yeah, we're just over a month in now, aren't we, for and having responsibility for that. I met with many of the Norfolk and Suffolk MPs last week, and first thing on the list to discuss was dentistry. Absolutely, we know we've got very substantial challenges across Norfolk and Waveney, but nationally, absolutely. I'm going to put a positive spin on it. I'm naturally an optimist, but actually, from speaking with our team within the ICB about opportunities that we can make improvement. We know this is going to take years to do in terms of where we want to get to, but we do think there are things that we can do collectively, can do as an organisation, working with partners across the system to make improvements for our patients and the people of Norfolk and Waveney. So, but it is a colossal challenge, but all across services. I know we're going to talk about urgent emergency cares and an agenda item that's coming up, but 111. For example, an awful lot of the calls that go to 111 are relating to dentistry related issues. So it's a massive challenge, but I think we can be creative, and I think we can make some improvements even with the limited constraints that we have at the moment.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Any further questions? Andrew, I can't see any more hands up, so thanks so much for coming to share with us the progress to date. Please thank the team in the background who have been working on this, and Rebecca, your colleagues who have supported the process of engagement. Pass our thanks to everybody, and I'm sure we'll look forward to hear the next update when you are much more progressed with the plan. So thanks so much for the work so far, and we'll look forward to hear again in the future. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Okay, we'll move on now to agenda number 7, and that is the complaints report. John, I haven't seen, is John on the call? Not yet. We are running ahead a bit. That's unusual. I cannot see him on the call, so I don't know what arrangements are made. Rachel, do you have to dial him in or some such? Because again, we can do it, swap around a bit. And Mark, whilst we're waiting for John, I think if it's okay with you, Mark, I will move on to urgent emergency care update from you. I know lots of work has taken place. There's still lots to do, but I think we're making some strides, and it will be good to hear where we're at. So thank you so much, Mark. Over to you.
Thank you, Aliona. Yes, absolutely. And I should say apologies. The slides are quite data heavy, but that's the nature of urgent emergency care, particularly in the national context. So I'm going to try, and the data is there for you to look at, but I'm not going to focus on that. I'm keen to pull out the kind of some of the key aspects of the work around urgent emergency care and actually what it means for people in Norfolk and Waveney. So every year we expect, we do an awful lot of work across the NHS and social care and wider system to how can we best support patients at periods of times of pressure in urgent emergency care, and that's largely winter pressures we often talk about, but actually they all seem to merge into one at the moment. It's quite extraordinary how things have changed over the last 2 to 3 years. Of course, with the pandemic has also had a massive impact. But the slides there give you a flavour of where we are as a system, and I think the key part that I'm keen to stress is whenever we talk or think about urgent emergency care, we always tend to think about things not working and things that are very difficult to deliver. But actually, as the pack has highlighted, there are some positives in the story across Norfolk and Waveney, and we've even been told that we're a national exemplar in a positive sense in many respects in some areas. So what are those areas? Well, when we speak to the people of Norfolk and Waveney about their care and the care they receive, particularly around urgent emergency care, by and large, people don't want to be in hospital unless they absolutely need to be there, particularly the older generation, the older people in Norfolk and Waveney, just don't want to be in hospital. And the pandemic exacerbated that, I would suggest. So, a key part of what we've been trying to do is how do we keep you well? How do we keep you out of hospital? That links with Suzanne, the work there with the prevention, population health management work. And actually we have had some real successes. So just pulling out a few of the stats in the paper there, between this year that's just gone, so 2022-23 and 19-20, which was the year pre-pandemic. The pandemic year is a bit difficult because it was so exceptional. On demand management, in terms of trying to keep people away from hospital unless they absolutely need to be there, we have had success. So there have been over 28,000 fewer ambulance dispatched. So that means that we've been able to give patients a different response, hopefully a better response, rather than just sending an ambulance and taking them to hospital. Likewise, we've had over 22,000 fewer ambulances have taken people to hospital. So one of the stats that we look at is how many people are taken to hospital and then go home. So what can we do better, so that we've invested in kind of out of hospital community services, and we know there's much more that we can do, but we've seen a real improvement there. In terms of emergency admissions, those numbers have also gone down. So on the demand side of things, there were over 8,500 fewer emergency admissions last year compared to pre-pandemic, which again I think is a great testament to the work that many people have done. And actually, Paula, you mentioned it, the work of the partnerships, the work of place, the work in communities, I think is a large part responsible for delivering that. How do we keep people well, keep people at home and not needing that support? Other things in the but so that's some of the positives. Sorry, my screen has just gone blank in front of me, which is completely the wrong time for that to happen. But areas that we're not doing so well is around the category 2 response time. So this is the ambulances for what's the category 2 response. That's for heart attacks, strokes, sepsis and burns. I'm not a clinician, but frankly, I think I've got that right. So this is high need. We know we are failing people and not getting them the ambulance responses that they need as quickly as they should have it. Many reasons for that, but that is absolutely something that will be focused on in the future. Handover delays at our hospitals. have been a real issue for us. We have seen improvement, but we know flow right across the system, but it's really noticeable at the front door of our hospitals. So we know patients have had to wait far too long or too often at the front door of our hospitals going into an A&E department. We have seen an improvement in the length of stay. So once you are admitted to hospital or a community hospital, we know that the well-being of patients, their health deteriorates the longer they do stay in a hospital bed. I think that the stat is 10 days in a hospital bed for over 80s is equivalent to 10 years of aging in terms of muscle wastage. So the quicker we can support people on their rehab journey, the better. And we have seen an improvement in the overall length of stay as an average in our hospital and community units, but we know that there's much more that we can do. We have seen an improvement in our 4-hour response time. So that's when if you go to an A&E department, we should be targeting that you are either admitted or discharged within 4 hours. We know those delays have been far longer. We're getting better at that, which is good to note. But this is all about patient experience again, isn't it? How can we improve that? So in summary, we are on a journey. We know we've got some big areas that we need to make improvements. Frankie, you stole my thunder a little bit earlier around the what are we prioritising. You know, you brought it up, but it's good that we're all on the same page here about what are the priorities for us. In the pack, you'll see there's our plan on the page. But as Frankie said, the areas that we're really focusing on and have acknowledged in the joint forward plan is that length of stay. How do we support people and get their journey, speed up their journey so they can get them home as quickly as possible? Absolutely need to focus on those category 2 response times for patients with their ambulances, and also the virtual ward work. So how can we, rather than being cared for in hospital, how can we care for you better at home, even if you have a clinical need but doesn't necessarily need you to be in hospital? So a real snapshot. I think it's probably questions and discussion a better use of time rather than listening to me waffle on. So I'll pause at that point, Aliona, but hopefully that report is helpful just to give you a sense of where we are.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. May I ask a question regarding category 2? I'm sure that category is quite wide, with lots of conditions included. Is there any scope that the category is going to be subcategorized somehow so we can actually respond to people who do need help within the first 10 minutes, or whatever, you know, different conditions require different response time? Because my understanding is that category is very wide, and in a way it is sort of affecting the way we measure the response time because of the too many conditions in one category. So we can't really address them all, but they all have slightly different need in terms of how we respond. Frankie, I can see your hand up because it is a pretty clinical question, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought I'd step in for Mark.
Thanks, Frankie.
That's helpful, Mark. So the categories are nationally defined. So that's the first thing. These are not up to us. We don't define them. And each ambulance service is held to account against those categories. So that's the first thing. Category 1 is immediate life-threatening, where we want the ambulance to be there within 8 minutes. Category 2 is get there pretty damn quick. So the target is to be within 18 minutes. So that's why, as Mark says, it's things like heart attacks and strokes. So these are absolutely urgent, but just not quite as urgent as a multi-vehicle pile-up where it has to be immediate. So these are the very most important. And then category 3 is the much wider, and category 4 is people who, again, much wider, but significantly less urgent. The other thing is that the call handlers are highly trained and absolutely do the best they can. And there is also clinical advice within the call centres to review and check. And there is a rolling sense checking to say, actually, that category 2 person is a person. What was wrong with them? How many minutes? They're at more risk of deteriorating. And so it's quite a dynamic process. But I think if we tried to categorise it into A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K, people would spend so much time being questioned on the telephone. They're urgent. We just need to get there.
Thank you. Good. Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, frankly, we're right in saying one of the areas we've really focused is on, you mentioned about the clinical triage. So rather than just an algorithm that says send ambulance, there's a lot more clinical triage now. I'm particularly pleased with how our 111 service and our 999 service are now working together, and lots more work happening around how can we make sure we get the right response for the patient, so that we have the clinical advice service based, which is mainly GPs, but assistant nurse practitioners, and also man that service and staff that service.
And they're sort of checking and validating and reprioritizing all the time.
Absolutely. But and just adding to that, I think one of the things that I'm often surprised by is the really visible stuff, particularly if you look at the news and you look at read the newspapers. When people talk about urgent emergency care, people think of ambulances, A&E departments. They don't tend to think about the wider urgent care piece. And one stat that actually surprises people quite frequently is that over 80% of urgent care every day is actually dealt with in primary care, not at hospitals, not with the ambulance. Just the actual proportion is very small there. So in terms of the work we do, linking back to the previous item with the joint forward plan, one of our 8 priorities, I think number 2 is primary care, and that's what, relatively small changes in a negative way can have a massive impact on our urgent emergency care system. So we really do need to focus on that prevention side as well.
Indeed. Thank you, Mark. So I forgot the question. I'll come back. I did have another question, so I'll let others ask, and then it'll come back to me. Any questions for Mark or Frankie, depending on the nature of the question, from anybody? No, I can't say anything. And I'll probably ask my question afterwards when it comes back to me, so I'm not going to delay this. It was related to the presentation, Mark. Discharge. I remembered now. Of course, patient's admission sometimes could be delayed by the fact that there is no beds available and so on. I presume, again, it's just reassurance seeking here that the work you're doing in this area is linked very much to the discharge work, and we're having some synchronicity between the two, and there's some improvements in that field.
Absolutely, Aliona. That's one of the real critical pieces for us. Beds aren't always the answer.
Nope.
Absolutely, beds aren't always the answer. The best bed is the person's bed within their own home with the right care wrapped around it, whenever we can achieve that. So we don't want to shift to a completely bed-based model, because it's not best for our patients in the majority of cases. However, yes, we're absolutely looking at that. We're also working with regional and national colleagues around, and there's a number of options at the moment where we're thinking about next winter, what can we get in place to make sure that we've got the right amount of capacity. So that demand and capacity piece, it's quite challenging because there are so many variables. So being a bit technical and dull and boring around this, if we reduce the average length of stay by 3, 4, 5 days, then it means the equation is you need far fewer beds in your system if you can get that length of stay down. So it's quite a delicate balance, but absolutely it's an area we're focusing on. Yes.
Good. Thanks so much. Thank you. No more hands up. So thank you very much, Mark. We'll wish you success with the work going forwards. I know it's plenty to do still, and at some point we'll hear about the further progress made. So we'll look forward to that, Mark. Thank you, and please thank the team behind it for us. I think we're coming now to complaints. So let's see what the Norfolk population tells us about our services and what inquiries we're getting and so on. John, I can see you joined us. Welcome.
Thank you.
You prepped all the paperwork. So John, please take it as everyone read it. Yeah. So just give us the highlights, and then we'll invite people to ask questions. So over to you, John, please.
Thanks, Aliona. Yeah, and as you said, I've taken the report as read. For those of you that don't know me, my name is John Punt. I'm the Complaints and Inquiries Manager for Norfolk and Waveney ICB. I'm really pleased to bring back a report which actually highlights the remaining volume from the financial year of 22-23. So for those of you that were here last time, I presented a paper which took you through the volumes and trends from Q1 to Q3. I think the high level message in the report, and hopefully it's kind of reflected, is that actually the volume of work that the team is processing has significantly reduced from during the financial year, which for us is a really positive thing, because during 21-22 it became particularly difficult, I think, to ensure that all inquiries receive the time and attention they deserve. There was a lot of pressure on our team, as there was a lot of pressure across the system, but actually we were at that point, we were probably at, I would indicate, maybe like 350% up on pre-pandemic levels, whereas actually now we're returning to whatever normal is nowadays. But it also indicates that our volumes are probably about to exponentially increase. So it provides an update on primary care complaints, and as the committee will know, the full delegation of commissioning for primary care services came to the ICB on the 1st of April, but that didn't include complaints and concerns, which currently, right now, is only with the ICB in shadow form, and that means that essentially NHS England prepare the responses, and then Tracy signs those out as our chief executive. That will change as of the 1st of July, so we'll be getting everything. That includes 2 full-time members of staff who we've met with recently and are really looking forward and really excited about joining the team. And we've also been engaged in regular dialogue with colleagues at NHS England and other ICBs in the region, actually, to ensure a smoother transition is going to take place. But I think what we don't know is that the NHS England contact centre right now handles lots and lots and lots of contacts at first point. So either be it the telephone call that's received or the emails that's received, they're able to give that person the answers that they need right away. We don't know if those people are going to gravitate towards ICBs as they become a bit more learned around where the commissioning arrangements lie. And if they do, the volumes that the contact centre are receiving are vast. I've seen them, we're talking about in the thousands, sometimes weekly and monthly. And so I think that's something that we're just going to have to keep a regular handle on, and NHS England have committed to regular conversations about that. So that's primary care complaints. You will also note in there, and I think it's worth just flagging it right now, so 45% of complaint responses went out on time. So our target working time scale was, or is, 30 working days. That isn't, in my mind, a position that we want to be in, and the remainder essentially are due to information being delayed coming back to our team. Now that could be internal ICB departments, but quite often we manage large multi-provider complaints which are quite complex in their nature, so it might mean that providers are delayed in coming back to us, or might have slightly different timescales that they work to. So I think in terms of, Aliona, just for some reassurance moving forward, I've already been talking to Karen Barker about potentially just bringing a report, probably monthly, I want to say, that goes into EMT and just says these are the complaints that we've got that are outstanding, these are the complaints that are about to breach our target timescales. What do we want to do in that, in terms of escalation, or actually are there really valid reasons? Because with all of those complaints that have gone over time, we will obviously get back to the complainant and advise them what's happening and try and provide them with an update as to a revised timescale if that's possible. But it isn't always possible, and that isn't a desirable position, I think, for anyone to be in. So us having better routes of escalation, I guess, will be better for us. So, I mean, I think that's probably the highlights. Is there any questions that anyone might have? Oh, look, lots of hands up already.
I know, and I nearly asked one, but I'll wait. So I'll go to Frankie first, and then to Mark, and then to Judith.
Thank you. I've got a few. Sorry. So you've made the point well, John. But the timescales.
Yes.
I think it's really, really important. So 45% have been completed within the response time of 30 days. I'm embarrassed by that. And I'm angry by that. So I really, and I know it's not your fault. And clearly you've highlighted in the report often because you're waiting for somebody else, but that we don't have a robust escalation. So I strongly feel, as an action from this meeting, we need to address that. It's not okay. You know, a complaint is a gift. Somebody's taken time to explain, you know, they've had a suboptimal experience, and we're going to spend a month before we even. I mean, I know we've got a pretty good, what was it, 96% acknowledgement within them. With that's good. At least they know they've been heard. But so that was my first thing. The second thing was inquiries. I think we should have a target timescale. I know inquiries vary, but again, I think we should acknowledge and say, you know, we do expect to give you an answer. You know, why not just have the same timescale? And if it's a really complicated inquiry, we can reply back to say, do you know what, this is going to be a long piece of work and it's going to take ages, but this is where we've got to in the 30 days. And then thirdly, when we're talking about the MP inquiries, I can absolutely understand why we might log them separately, but I hope we're not treating them differently. No. Some people will phone the press and having been a medical director of a trust, I know what it's like when certain individuals will contact the press and their MP and everybody jumps up and down, but somebody else who's a little bit less forthright, you shouldn't get any less a response. So although I think it's fair enough that we log them separately, I would hope that we still use exactly the same timescales and targets. And I wonder if it's worth us logging the dental complaints separately, because it may well be that you know that we end up having very different and difficult times achieving the response rates we'd like to with the dental, but we don't want to see everything else go downhill. So I think it'd be useful to log them separately.
Yes, and I think there's a lot to unpack there, Frankie. But thank you. I think your first question was a bit more of a statement than a question. So if I maybe talk about, because you're absolutely right, and I think it is, you know, kind of it is unacceptable that, you know, 45% are going out on time. I can say with confidence that those complainants have often been updated and have regular dialogue. And look, some of those, because of the nature of complaints that arrive at ICB level, are the more complicated ones, so they are going to take a bit more time to unpick, and the Ombudsman's guidance is really clear that, look, you can take up to 6 months, but you absolutely shouldn't, you know, kind of where it is prudent to get a response as soon as possible. That's where I thought if we could have a regular touch point at EMT, just a really high level, look, we've got 5 or 10 outstanding, these are the service areas, these are the providers, you know, can you help, you know, whatever that might look like, that would be really appreciated. In terms of the inquiries, I think you raise a really interesting point, and I think the complexity or the landscape is about to change in terms of complaints and concerns handling. So the PHSO, which I talked about quite recently at the last committee that I attended, have come out with some new guidance in terms of complaints handling, and we haven't fully absorbed that as yet, and we're no different to neighbouring ICBs, because I've talked to colleagues there, but actually that guidance I think almost will mean that we recategorise a lot of the informal concerns and inquiries, and they will start to become complaints. So it might be that our complaints numbers start to shoot up, but actually, you know, our inquiries numbers you know, kind of go down as a reflection of that. And I think when that happens, there will be more of a mandated timescale around that. I think you're right. All of those inquiries are acknowledged. I mean, I would say with confidence, within about 24 hours, our team work really hard to make sure that happens, and then we get back to them as soon as possible. But yeah, no, I take on board what you're saying, and that's something that we can look at for future policy work. For MP inquiries, just to offer a level of reassurance, you're absolutely right. They are treated no differently. I think it's just that they're not. So a lot of organisations that I've worked for across complaints have categorised them as complaints rather than an inquiry from a member of Parliament, and actually very often they're just a question that a caseworker has brought to us, or they're a softer inquiry than a formal complaint. So it's just, that's why we strip them out separately. But no, they don't get a gold-plated service, I guess is what you're driving towards. No, they will get exactly the same service as any other constituent would get. Does that answer your questions?
Mark, before I go to you, because it relates completely to this last point about MP inquiries, John, in my experience, patients or people in our community, they may try to solve their complaint with the provider. They get nowhere. They don't know about the ICB complaints route, and they go to the MPs because that's what they know. So I have seen where actually the MPs are passing on a complaint rather than just an inquiry. So I'm wondering how easy it's for you is to separate within your records which one is just a general question about waiting times, for example, and how many of them are somebody's complaining about this, they didn't get anywhere, there's no answers, can you help? Because that to me is more of a complaint than just an inquiry. So it'll be interesting at some point if you are able to separate those. But
I
also,
sorry, go on. Sorry, Alina.
Also is a lesson for us probably is to how do we advertise, how we let people know how to complain to the ICB if that is the route they feel comfortable taking. I'm not sure many are very aware of it.
So I think there's two strands to that. So in terms of the MP inquiries, we absolutely can, kind of categorise that, what's a complaint and what isn't. And if a complaint has already been brought to the attention of a provider or the ICB, and the MP comes to us as well, although we will double count it because they've come in via two different mechanisms. What we will say to the Member of Parliament is, look, we've already got this as a complaint. We will just copy you into the response, which further kind of reaffirms what Frankie was saying about not to be treated any differently, and that is just the case. In terms of sorry, Aliona, I've lost my thread.
It was about how we let people know how they can complain directly to the ICB rather than to MPs. Yeah.
Thank you. So just coming back to the primary care complaints. So actually, the guidance that's come down to us from NHS England provides all systems with a kind of communications toolkit. So essentially, it's to shout, far and wide. We bring the complaints to us now in terms of primary care complaints. But that probably is a good opportunity as well to say, we're here, this is what the team does, and just to make sure our presence is known out in the wider world. So I'll talk to our colleagues in communications about that as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Aliona. Thanks, John. Helpful report as well. But similar theme to what Frankie was saying, really. Absolutely hear your message around the escalation route. So, Frankie, we can both do we could tag team that at exec, can't we? Which I think is really important. But building on that, these complaints are very important at an individual level, but they're also collectively. So the kind of themes and trends element really. I know you kind of feed this into us already, but that's what's really critical from my perspective. So it's the so what question that you often ask us, Aliona. It's it's not just about satisfying an individual patient request, the complaint, and then saying, right, we've hopefully addressed that, we'll move on to the next one. It's around, actually, this is a building issue here that we're seeing, and it's really helpful intelligence from our population around things that are going off or areas that we need to be focusing on. So just, please, I know you are proactive on that, but that's, I think, really important for us to see here and even more importantly act upon. So welcome your thoughts on how we might better do that in the future as well.
So there are so I haven't actually talked about it because I was trying to keep it high level and conscious of time, but there are 3 areas that are flagged in the report itself. So continuing healthcare is one, access to appointments in terms of kind of GP face-to-face is one that we've seen, and I forget the other. I'm going to have to bring up the report so that I can. Yeah, and sorry, and the walk-in centre consultation as well, which were kind of themes that we saw in Q4. I take your point, Mark, and I guess, so I've often thought about this as our team, because as Aliona's just touched on, we're almost like tip of the iceberg because lots of people don't know that we're here. So what I get is kind of a really tiny reflection in microcosm of what's happening at provider level, and I wonder how much professional curiosity as an organisation. I mean, I don't know how we achieve this, but that we need to take out of these complaints to go into providers and start asking them what's going on. And it is about, and I talked about the team's volumes. It is about having the bandwidth to do that sometimes, because that is a wider task. But also, and I'll talk to anyone about this until they're bored of it. But it's about bringing together the other elements and the other contacts that we receive and the other really important feedback. So the ICB does often get cited on provider to provider feedback, which my complaints team don't see. There's serious incidents that are raised at ICB level but are investigated at provider level as well, and I don't think the triangulation of all of those things happens as effectively maybe as a system as we need it to. And if we can look at that, I don't have the answers, by the way. I'm just flagging this as something that this is what I feel about it. Then if we can do that better moving forward, and that I think that one, that helps quality improvement programs, but two, that that starts to inform commissioning cycles as well.
Absolutely. No,
I am so glad you just said this, John. I was going to ask for it.
Yeah, can I have like 15 new staff to do that then as well? That'd be lovely.
And Aliona, if I may, just to say, and I know it's a real hard job that you do, John, as well. So thank you to you and the team. And actually, some of the cases that you see are quite upsetting as well.
Yes.
So grateful to you and the team for the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And yes, learning from all of that is very important, and making changes to make sure they don't happen again is another important thing to remember. So yes, please, if we can find a way of doing all those things, John, it'll be great. And hopefully you can get the resource for it too. No pressure, Mark. Judith, over to you.
Thanks, Aliona. My question really is pretty similar to what Mark has just said, in that I was just going to say much of the conversation, and by its very nature, we've asked John to report about complaints for the ICB. So it's very discussion's been very about the process and about how many people are responded to. And all I was going to say is actually keep in mind that that's feedback. That's absolutely golden, patient and public feedback. And I was just going to follow on, and it's being very simplistic, I know, but if, John, you were given a magic wand to change, I don't know, 2 or 3 things in terms of our ICB system that would absolutely reduce your complaints enormously, what would those 2 or 3 things do? What would they be?
Oh, that's an excellent question, Judith. Thank you. I think first would probably be GP access, the face-to-face stuff, and I guess at Healthwatch, kind of you guys are hearing that as well a lot. People feel passionately about being able to get an appointment with a clinician, in their GP practice. I'm not saying that needs to be a doctor, but kind of an appropriate clinician. I think that is something that people feel really strongly about, and I think if we as a system could reimagine what that looks like in terms of how someone is able to access primary care services, and I know that's probably on lots of people's agendas at the moment, but that would be brilliant. And then I think second, if you'll indulge me for a second, is probably, and it's something that is absolutely being worked on, I know, and there's lots of fantastic work that's happening in the system already, but there is as you'd imagine, quite a frustration with elective waits as well. So anything we could do to wave the magic wand so that there were 0-week waits rather than however many week waits there are at the moment, I think are the things that we feel strongest, kind of we feel more keenly when we get inquiries from MPs, complainants, inquiries, whoever they may be.
Thank you for answering that. And can I just comment on the access to GPs? It is what we hear about lots, but actually the piece of work we did in the summer and autumn last year revealed to us that there are actually quite a lot of people that are quite happy with their GPs, and it tends to be the focus on certain GP surgeries, and often they're the ones where there's been big housing development and the infrastructure's not really thought about, making sure it's there for to support that increase in the population in that particular area. But my question leading on from that would be, are we taking the action? It was kind of mentioned a bit about do we then look at those contracts with those GP practices? Do we then look at, the commissioning and the report, that because if we know it's a handful and not all of them, we should be doing something with that handful, shouldn't we? And not tarring them all with the same brush. But right. Thank you for that, John.
Thanks, Judith.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm mindful of time, so if we can keep it concise. Tracy, and then Andy, please.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So just reflecting and listening to what everybody said, and I think it's really great about that triangulation of the complaints and working with both providers and the ICB. But I was thinking, reiterating back that it's hard to put a complaint in. So I think the most important thing, certainly from my experience of managing any complaints, is that people feel listened to, that they are heard. And I'm just wondering sometimes that when you're going through a complaint, and if there's, email correspondence, letter correspondence, that can be quite challenging. So is there a kind of an element in the process where there's a personalized approach for people? Do you ever see people in a face-to-face? Do you have the opportunity to do that and actually meet with people? Because sometimes the elements of talking through and bringing the right people together often is really helpful. So just a question, really.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question, Tracy. Thank you. And I think the world's changed, hasn't it? You know, kind of we're all, you know, a lot of people are working remotely, and actually that has, I think, you know, we should see that as an opportunity more than anything, because, you know, you can see people face to face via video calls and hear people out. And I met with a complainant last week to that end to make sure that we fully understood the complaint. I think the personalised approach is the one that I would agree with the most, because I kind of know this from experience that sometimes you can read a complaint and know this person would like quite an official, you know, kind of letter, formal letter, and there's other people where if you just pick up the phone and have a telephone conversation with them, then actually you could probably nip their issues in the bud quite quickly, and they don't want, you know, all the pomp and ceremony of a letter from the chief executive. You know, kind of they just want their issues fixed. We're really fortunate to have a really experienced team within the ICB's complaints and inquiries team, and I know the guys coming over from NHS England are as well. I think they talk all the time to kind of recognise, like, what's the best way from A to B. So whilst we have a policy which says you need to acknowledge it within X date and it needs to be responded within Y date, actually I'm a huge advocate of making sure that we treat each complaint on its merits, and if it needs a face-to-face or a virtual or whatever it might be, and we'll always be open to that post response as well. I think that's worth saying, is that, you know, absolutely, if someone wishes to meet after they've received a complaints response because they remain dissatisfied or they just want to clarify bits, and I know, you know, and Mark will echo this, that we've definitely got senior support within the organisation to meet with complainants as well. It wouldn't just be the complaints team, it would be the appropriate people. So yeah.
Thank you, John. Andy.
Thank you, Eliana. John, I know that you're a part of the Complaints Managers Network in Suffolk that meets once every 6 months, and it met last week, I think.
Yes.
I don't know if you were there or not, but it's I always hear good things about that, because it's a safe space for complaints managers to meet and discuss good practice and challenges and so on. The reason I just want to there are literally tens of thousands of comments that we receive over the years as a Health Watch, and currently you'd imagine that because of the state of play nationally, people would be fairly dissatisfied, but it still averages at over 3 stars out of 5 across the board. Now, it depends on what you're looking at and who you're asking comments about, but it does show that people are prepared to compliment, and even when they do comment and they have an issue, they recognise the context. The reason I mention it is that there's a really fine line, there's a fine piece of paper between a comment about a poor experience and a complaint. So if you do get trends in your complaints, it really is worth checking with your local Health Watch, depending on what area you're in, just to ask, do you have any comments that match this? Because it may not be a 1 in 10,000. It might actually be something that's a bit more common, but most people won't have uttered a complaint as a result.
And I think that's an excellent point. Just to talk about the Complaints Managers Network, yeah, we replicate that as well in Norfolk. So Judith is kind enough to host that, and yet I wasn't able to get to last week's meeting because I had a delegation meeting with NHS England, which meant we were talking about primary care complaints. But I do always attend them where possible, because there's not many complaints managers, and it's a bit of a kind of lonely existence, I would say, is probably the best way to put it, in so much as there's not many of us, so actually to talk to colleagues in a very safe environment is always appreciated. I think, Andy, what you're saying probably feeds into my point around triangulation as well, you know, kind of, so that's another really rich source of feedback, isn't it, that we can start to tap into and just form a wider picture of what's going on across the system, and start to use that information meaningfully, which is something that I'd be, as I say, really keen to do and to develop as a system moving forward. Sorry, Eliana, I've rabbled on for
you're spot on
way
time.
Over my welcome. Oh, that's good.
Spot on time, and I think we had a very rich conversation. We all care about patients getting good experience, and we want them to experience that from our services locally. So I think you'll find this passion. You know, every time you come, people want to make sure that we deliver on what people deserve to actually receive from our providers. So it's a very important piece of work your team is doing. And if we can learn from what your findings are, and if we can make those changes in the system, so we reduce those, unfortunate events where people may have struggled or may not get what they were rather hopeful for, then that would be great. So, John, we'll look forward to hearing from you in the future. And yes, I think identifying some of the trends in particular areas, and going back to what Judy said, picking up through the commissioning, through the contract management, through whatever source we may be able to do that to make sure that we actually improve the quality of the delivery. That will be great. So very important piece of work. Thanks so much for all you're doing. Thank you to your team. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time for an update. Frankie, you put your hand up.
Sorry, just one final word, irritatingly. The policy, you're not asking us to update that policy, are you? I just noticed that
Sorry, no, yeah.
The version control is a bit funny because it says it's July 23. I presume you're reviewing it at the moment.
Sorry,
fine.
Sorry. So yeah, I should have clarified that, Frankie. It's an excellent point. The policy there's just minor aesthetic tweaks to reflect the fact that primary care complaints are coming on board from 1st of July. So that policy would not, provided the committee's happy with it, will not be uploaded until the 1st of July 23. So does that answer?
So it will come, and it will come back to this committee for sign off first.
So I'm asking the committee to sign it off, and it is literally there's a couple of paragraphs that have been changed because the current policy says if you've got a complaint about primary care, go here, essentially go to NHS England, and the proposed one for use from 1st of July doesn't say that. It says it can come to us. That's the only difference, really.
So yeah, that's what I understood. So as a committee, are we happy to approve the policy to be implemented from 1st of July?
Yeah, subject to the typos and stuff like that being sorted.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you've got it, John. I think. Thank you so much for that update. Okay. If there's not any other questions for John, we'll let him go and enjoy what he's doing. John, thank you so much. You can stay for the rest of the meeting. It's your choice. Okay, so we'll move on. Now we're coming. Mark, yes.
Yeah, hi, just the next item, we're having some issues with Rachel joining, so I don't think we're going to get them resolved. So if we may defer that item to the next meeting, that would be helpful. So sorry, we're desperately in the background trying to get things sorted, but I think we might need to defer that item if that's okay, please.
Yeah, fine, Mark, because I was looking and I couldn't see Rachel here. Rebecca, sorry. So I thought we may have to postpone it to later, but you're saying we're going to just.
If she joins, fantastic. But if not, I think if we could defer that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's see how it goes, but we'll move on to Rebecca now. Rebecca, an update on the people and communities approach. And again, and now is a work in progress. Lots to be done, and you're moving on with it. So let's hear from you.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. Yeah, I won't go through the slides. I'll assume that everyone has seen them, but really just to highlight that we are looking to launch a co-production hub in Co-Production Week, which is the start of July, to offer a central place for to support some of the sort of system-wide work. We've heard about the co-production strategy that's happening with the mental health transformation, for instance, and the hub would give them a place to sort of land and have a focal point. We're also trying to align our work as closely as you can with the County Council, Norfolk County Council, who are doing quite a lot of work in this area, and we're doing an event with them at the County Council as part of their Making It Real board. We'll be in the lobby where the big marble map is on the Monday and the Wednesday, and so trying to engage with County Council staff. The council has some co-production training for their staff, so we'll be sort of looking to talk to staff and service users, and we'll have people with lived experience there as well, hopefully. So hopefully that will be a nice event. Just also flagging that we do have live projects always on the go. We have a live project section of the website. The link is in the presentation. We've got some talking therapies engagements starting in June. The page is already up there, sort of looking at what we want to know. Looking at the from people who have access to the service, but also for people who haven't. I'm interested in looking at where people would go to access that, and communications issues and things like that. So please do take part, share when that's up and running. We've also got some engagement around the SOS bus and Castle Quarter. So the contract for the SOS bus is coming up. We don't think we've ever really done any kind of patient engagement around that. And what was the vaccination hub at Castle Mall, for those of us that have been around a while, Castle Quarter is kind of changing into a wellness hub, which is much more than vaccinations, again, as we've already mentioned, sort of looking at health checks and potentially looking at other things. So just wanted to sort of talk to local people. And we thought those two went quite well together. They're kind of geographically, Prince of Wales Road just around the corner, and they're kind of about drop-in, early help and etc. So again, that's live now and runs until the 11th of June. So please do share and feedback. We've got the results of the, as you will have everyone will have seen in the media, the walk-in centre engagement. And that's all up on our website now under the "You Said We Did" section. So we had a huge response and a lot of support. So we've listened to local people, and yeah, so it's staying open. And it was just really a quick heads up that the annual assessments that ICBs have now will include an element around our patient communities work. And that's centered around our website, our People and Communities Hub on the website. So that's how they will learn what we do. So we will be reviewing that. And I think it's over the summer. That's the indications are at the moment that will take place during the summer. So we'll be working with colleagues and partners and local people to make sure that we're telling our story as clearly as we can. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. In terms of the hub, yeah, I'm looking back at the presentation, sorry, the co-production hub, is that going to be on the ICB's website? Is going to be a portal where people can go to, yeah? A physical place? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so we're part of the Patients and Communities Hub. We're sort of trying to offer a centralised place where people can sort of come and have a look. So yes, it'll be part of that.
Are we communicating widely this?
Well, we were going to launch it in co-production week, so yeah.
But there are plans to communicate, yeah?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any questions for Rebecca? Any observations? No, I can't see any. Oh, I can, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Rebecca, I know we kind of speak about this in the day-to-day work, but I think it's also useful to have a conversation here. There's lots of really good work happening. Where would you like to go next with it? How would you like to build and grow from here, actually, based on all the work that's happening? Because I think it would be probably worth a discussion here today as well.
Ooh.
Sorry to put you on the spot because you didn't know that was coming. We should have prepped, but I just think it's really important that we as a committee get the opportunity to kind of think that through.
I think it would be great. There's loads we could do as a system. I mean, the patient experience and engagement people and the sort of health and wellbeing partnerships starting to look at co-production and Health Watch, VCSE. I just think there's loads more we could do as a system, and I think that's I think we are talking and trying to do that. I think we could perhaps do more with that. I think if we just had a couple more pairs of hands and a few more hours in the day, that would be a really great thing. I think it's happening, but everyone's always so busy. There's always so much to think about. But so I'd just like to see more in that space. And I think the other great thing would be the Insight Bank, which is part of the Community Voices project, which is, would be really a really great way to hear from some of the people that we don't, or we as an ICB in the NHS don't traditionally hear from. And I think, that Insight Bank can give us a basis to then offer out a whole range of and pulling in insight from all sorts of different places. I mean, we've heard a lot from, John today with the complaints and stuff that we could potentially be kind of having that as a portal for data and insight that's kind of out there, so that we're maximising it. And I think we're learning that that the feedback is just so important. I know Shelley's quietly in the background. She wants to pop up. That's great, but it's just how important it is to the people that are part of the project as well, and how it's just so great for them to hear that and use it for such a range of
Yeah, I think that's
functions.
sorry, just before Shelley comes in, if I may, Aliona, I think that's a really good challenge, because you know, the loud voices are absolutely important to hear almost all of the time, most of the time, but actually it's those quieter voices, those that don't always come forward, that we really want to hear about and then act upon, don't we? So sorry, Shelley, I interrupted. Sorry.
Before no, it's okay, Mark, because you sort of started what I was going to ask Rebecca, so I'll just finish that sentence if that's all right. Rebecca, what would be good for us to understand at some point also is exactly which group you're engaging with. Now, like Yoli, I said, so who responded, who are those 700 responses came from, is just so, again, we can identify where it's coming and are we reaching the people we really want to reach, because like Mark is saying, I'm concerned that we hear the ones who are already having a loud voice. And I know within the system we have people who can reach those more difficult, or those who may not engage because of all sorts of reasons. People may not engage. So we need to make sure we enable that engagement and those contributions. So it'll be good if we can have an understanding of where responses are coming from and where the engagement takes place, please. Yeah, Shirley, sorry for barging in. Over to you.
Thanks, Aliona. Yeah, it's just in addition to what Rebecca was then saying about the Insight Bank, I think we're putting increasing emphasis, aren't we, on qualitative insights. But those qualitative insights take human resource in terms of the analysis. It's not easy to automate. And we put a huge amount of emphasis and stock in our system on the quantitative side of things, i.e. business intelligence, data, Norfolk Insight platforms, rightly so. But they often define the problem, not necessarily the solution. And these qualitative insights can help with that. I think one of the challenges we're experiencing with voices and some of the conversations we've had today is we're collecting a huge amount of qualitative insight. And if we're going to make that useful and usable and be able to respond to it, we've got to invest resource into the analysis of those insights. And that's quite a challenge. We're working with Great Yarmouth Borough Council, with Paula's team at the moment, who have been hugely helpful in helping us with our thinking about, you know, from an independent viewpoint, what can we do with these insights? How do we present them back to the system? How do we respond to them? But if we're really going to make it work, we're going to have to put quite a lot more resource into the qualitative space, I think, than we are currently doing. There's loads in the Community Voices Bank that could help with community services review, talking therapies, and IAPT review, but we've got to be able to do the analysis of it. So it's not even new information that we need to collect. We need to maximise what we're currently collecting, I think.
That's right, Shirley. Thank you. Okay, Frankie.
Thank you. I was going to mention at the end of the meeting under AOB the Aging Well workshop, which is tomorrow afternoon. But this has been a really useful conversation, and I just wanted to thank Rebecca and Shelley. I absolutely take your point that you're kind of running to stand still and you haven't even had a chance to analyse all the stuff you've got so far. But I think this is a really valuable resource, and the approach we're taking tomorrow with the Aging Well project is to try and get as many people actually in the virtual room for the kickoff, but afterwards I think it would be really, really useful to bump up the input we can get by using these or similar resources. So I'm going to be asking for your help, I suspect, Rebecca, but you can say no or you can signpost, but I think it's another way of just reaching out, and I think it's really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Frankie. And yes, the Insight Bank, there's lots of information, and where Shirley's coming, I hope we're on the same page, Shirley, but we must be careful not to take just words and make sense of them. It needs to be within the context of what those feedback are given to understand actually what is the story in the background. Yeah. So doing that analysis is quite vital. Otherwise, it's just words on a page. Yeah.
And of course, triangulating it with things like the dementia report that Health Watch Suffolk shared with us in the beginning. You know, we've got all this feedback. We've got to use it. So it would be terrible if we don't use it.
The message I keep hearing today is about resources, and it has come up now in a number of topics. So we do need to think about it, because we'll be here talking about this in 5 months' time, still not having the resource. So something needs to take place. So I'll leave the execs in the room in this virtual room to think about it. Tracy, over to you.
Yeah, it's kind of a comment more than anything, but just reflecting on the current consultation, certainly around the Castle Quartered as a wellness hub. So certainly from my involvement in the Norwich locality, and I think this is about resources, capacity and partnering up. So what we've been able to do is work with Norwich City Council, who have agreed through their kind of insights that they gather through their Place Plus programme, is to kind of have their community connectors within the vicinity of Castle Quarter and in some of those areas which they call RETA areas, reducing inequalities in target areas, and just capture those conversations and not lead the information about what you would like to see in a wellness hub, but just in order to be around in that space and talk about it. So I think that's something about joining up with other things that are happening to make best use of everybody's resources as well. And that does link, that insight is also linking to the other community voices work as well, which Shelley's involved in. But I think that's a specific, something that before we wouldn't have the additionality to include that with one of our kind of surveys and our kind of engagement exercise. So I'm really pleased that we can do that on this occasion.
Thank you, Tracy. Any other observations, thoughts for Rebecca? No, I can't see any more hands up. Rebecca, well done. It is work which is involved, isn't it? And reaching to the right people and knowing how to reach them and how to engage is another type of skill. So well done. Keep going. And yeah, we'll look forward to hearing, what progress has been made in the future. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Mark, I had looked at the screen and I could not see Rebecca around. So I think we'll go to the last item now and we'll have to reschedule this, yeah? Reagenda the item. So under any other business, we have the Population Health and Inequalities Board Assurances and Escalations report. Frankie, this is something new which came to us. We haven't seen it before. So please, can you talk us through it, give us a little bit of background to it, and yes, let's see what we learned from it and what you need from us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So the first thing I would say is that actually I've already asked Rachel that in future this shouldn't be any other business. This should be front and centre. This is a new board which we have been wanting to set up for some time, and the first board has now met. The terms of reference have now been approved, and that is really the engine room to oversee the work of our Population Health Management Oversight Group and our Health Inequalities Oversight Group. At this meeting before, we've had sort of very much overarching presentations of what population health management and what health inequalities are, and the sort of scope of the possible if we really start taking this seriously. But this is now the engine room to oversee that. So my proposal is that at every meeting, I will bring with you an update from the board, giving you the key areas of assurance, so things that you need to know that we've done, and key areas of escalation that I think are really important that you need to know about or that we need your help with. And so our PMO team have sort of suggested this format, but obviously very happy to take feedback on it. And huge apologies that you didn't receive the cover sheet. There was one, it didn't get through. So to note that the first few issues, so we've approved the terms of reference, and just to highlight that so to ensure that the committee is aware that we do have statutory duties as an ICS to use population health management techniques to address inequalities and to improve health. The next one was really to make sure that the board the committee is aware of the scale of the challenge for our health and care system if we do not prioritise prevention, as per our Joint Strategic Needs Assessment and the Joint Forward Plan that we looked at earlier on today. But just to highlight, just to pull out a few key aspects which were buried in the JFP earlier on, so apologies for those of you who are eagle-eyed, but actually our population is growing. By 2040, there'll be 36% more people over 65. Most of them will be over 75, but there'll only be a 4% increase in working age adults. And there'll actually be a 1% reduction in children and young people, because our birth rate overall is falling. And because of the deprivation within our area, those core 20 populations, so people living in the 20% most deprived areas, those members of our population are responsible for 2,000 more emergency admissions with lung disease and 6,000 more severe mental illness than there ought to be. You know, so that is the scale of the amazing win we could have if we really do use the data and go and find and support people who we know are out there and we know are not getting as good access. And further, that within the next 5 years, we're looking, unless we do something different, the demand for appointments with a doctor is going to have increased by more than 1,000 a day. So it's just to really make sure the committee really is aware of. That's why we keep banging on about prevention and early intervention and using our data to target that. So I've stressed that point, probably overkill a bit, but I just really we've discussed it in detail at the board, and we just want to make sure that the committee really is cited on that is why it's so important. We also, I think it is important that this committee understands that we do have a framework for how to prioritise, and we do have excellent input from our public health as well as our PHM colleagues, which have identified the scale of the problem, but also the areas where we will get most bang for our buck in terms of improving our population's health. And so we have a framework to look at that. So I've got it up on my other screen. So to specifically, does it address inequalities or Core 20? Is it relevant to our 5 clinical areas? Will it have an impact on the system pressures? Can we actually make a difference by approaching this? Is there an opportunity? And does it make logical sense? And then back around the loop. So we've got a framework, and by using that framework, we have identified our earliest areas of focus. So again, that's really to provide the board assurance that we're not making it up. We are using science. There is data and thought behind it. A couple of things to end, a couple of areas where we do need to do more work. We need to coordinate, because we are in danger of overlapping and duplicating, because there's so much going on. And so that's an area of focus for the board, to make sure that we don't duplicate the multiple strands of work. For example, the Health Improvement Transformation Group, the Health Protection Assurance Board, what sits where. We need to be aware of what each other are doing, but not doubling up. And finally, our data. We do need, our BI team needs a little bit more time to really make sure that we have the data set that we need. And there is a collaborative approach setting that up at the moment, but it will be even better in about 3 months' time, when we will have fully linked data set from which to work.
Thank you, Frankie. Well, that's very interesting, because when we met us for development session, is exactly what we talked about, wondering about duplications, but also we learned about this new board, because there was 2 boards together, sort of 2 separate boards before, and I was not quite sure who fits where. And then I was told about this board, and we knew that is new. And yes, interestingly enough, the committee did feel that it has to report into this committee. So
it does.
Look, happens not quite by magic, but it did happen. We will talk to each other, but our concern is very much to make sure we A, don't duplicate, but B, don't have things which fall between, because people are not talking to each other. So it is important that we actually keep an eye on all the spinning plates and make sure we don't lose things out of sight. So yes, right timing. And this paper, Rachel has contacted me saying, I only got it now. What do we do? I said, very happy for you to put us AOB. It's not on the agenda, but we'll make it. So it's all happening in a good time.
But I would request that it's on the agenda as a regular item for every time from here on. Yeah.
That's right. And the draft forward plan says exactly that, Frankie. So it's all good. We're thinking about the same stuff. And that plan is at Mark at the moment. So I'll go to Mark now.
Thanks, Aliona. And Frankie, you said about overkill. I don't think it is overkill. I think this is so important in the future. And I think we need to, shout this very, very loudly, and I think the work of this group will absolutely encourage that. Just another stat. I know we're throwing a few stats out there today, and I know you know this one already. But in terms of that, you know, the reasons we have to do this around demand today, we've heard about the complaints and the GP access was John's top point. Well, actually, we've never been offering more appointments in primary care than we are now, and I think the figure in March was 600 and something appointments offered across Norfolk and Waveney in March. So that's the equivalent of well over half the population, entire population of Norfolk and Waveney having appointments at their GP surgery. And I know it'll be multiple people, some people having multiple appointments, I know, but in you know, quite a staggering statistic actually, isn't it, that way over half of the equivalent amount of people across Norfolk and Waveney are accessing their GP practice in any one month. So I think it's great that it's here. I'm looking forward to this committee really supporting its work and reviewing it, and I think that prevention, population health management, we ignore and don't do this well at our peril.
Mark, on the comment you made about the number of appointments, the question which popped into my mind is, what is the rate of DNAs though? Because we're offering those appointments, but I also know the reality is that people will make the appointment and never turn up, and then somebody else who desperately needs an appointment cannot get it, and then people are complaining saying, I can't see my GP. Are we looking at that data? What are we doing about it, please?
Yes, we do have that, and I'm hoping Frankie's got the figure in front of, because I don't today. But it's
24,000 appointments a month.
Thank you. I was going to say it's over 20,000, isn't it? But it's a high percentage, high proportion.
Indeed, Mark. It is a topic for discussion, because something needs to be done. We can't just wait resources and deprive people of that resource because people don't keep up to their appointments. So it is something to think about. Andy.
And sorry, just quickly, Ali, and sorry, Andy, but it's the same in dentistry as well. A very high last minute cancellation or non-attendance for dentistry as well. And when we know how valuable those appointments are.
Indeed. Andy.
Something that we've called for as Health Watch across the country, including in Suffolk and Norfolk, is that there is a far simpler way for a patient to cancel or rearrange an appointment. The problem is it's just as difficult to get through to make an appointment as it is to cancel an appointment. And if you're working Monday to Friday, you're not going to get the opportunities necessarily. You're not going to be waiting on the phone for maybe a couple of hours to get through. So if we can somehow manage to do that, then I think your DNAs will plummet.
Thank you, Andy. But it's interesting. There is a practice in Norwich who have changed the process, and all that you do, you just ring the number and pick up on whatever option, and actually you can cancel it without speaking to anyone, and then you just confirmation within minutes to say that your appointment has been cancelled. So you know that actually somebody dealt with it. So there are practices already locally which are solving some of those problems. But I know from my day job, it can be very disheartening for practitioners who are waiting to see patients and they're not turning up, and patients who do need that support and help, and they can't get it. So it is a problem. I guess it comes with free NHS, but it's not free because there's lots of resource put into it. So people do need to recognize that it costs lots of money to run those services. Okay. Any other questions for Frankie in regards to the new board and its workings? No, Frankie, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Yes, it will be definitely agenda item going forwards. Thank you. Any other business? Frankie.
I did mention it earlier, but my proper AOB is to bring to the attention of the committee the Aging Well workshop, which is being held tomorrow, which we are very excited about. A really, really interesting piece of work, which in due course will feed into this committee. So it's just the launch tomorrow, so we don't have much to bring back yet, but it will. The intention is for that whole programme of work to, in just the same way as PH and health inequalities will feed it, the older people framework will feed into here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And good luck with that. I have the invitation. And there is quite a few networks which we can, or the ICB can engage with in that piece of work. So involving all the people. So that's very positive. Okay. Anything else from anybody else? No, I can't see any hands up. Well, our next meeting, I'm just looking when that is going to be. It'll be on Monday, the 24th of July. So I'll look forward to seeing you all then. We do need to try and get the minutes and action log out a little bit earlier. And we'll set up the agenda for next meeting, which probably will include the missed item from today, Mark. So we'll get together and sort that out. But for now, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you for your contributions. Yes, very exciting. Next stage, next month, more interesting progress. So well done. Stay safe, and I'll see you, or we'll see each other very soon in July. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.